we're pretty close to having everything operational at the moment, but the next steps will be a little tricky. So we'll talk through them before we actually implement them. And at the moment, we still need to implement the put request to the post ID route and the post request to the post ID ratings route to both update a single post and to create a rating for a post. But here's the tricky part, especially this part right here. We're allowing put requests to the posts/post ID endpoint. Technically, any authenticated user would be allowed to update a given post with our current middleware. If we were to add the security middleware here, security.require authenticated user, that means any authenticated user could update any post, which is not actually what we want. We only want to ensure that users who originally created the post should be allowed to update it. Now, there's a number of ways to handle valid ways to handle situations like this. So be aware that this isn't the only solution, but the approach we're going to take is just to build a permissions middleware that will be responsible for protecting endpoints from users who aren't the owners. And to do that, we're going to create a new file in middleware called permissions.js. Cool. Now, this one's going to be an interesting one because it's kind of going to mix some of the other files in there. So just be aware of that. Did I update something here? Oh, I added that. Doesn't matter. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to require the post model. And then we're going to import some errors. This will be the first time we actually get to use the forbidden error, which is exciting. So make sure you import that one. And then we're going to do a few things here. All we're going to do really is, well, let's think about actually what we need to do here. If we have a put request, we want to ensure that the authenticated user is the owner of the post. So ensure authenticated user is owner of post. If they aren't, throw an error. Otherwise, we're good. Maybe we want to persist that post somewhere. So let's call this function const auth user owns post or something like that. And it will be a middleware. So it'll have the same signature, async rec res next. And we will run a try catch block where if there are any errors, we will return the next middleware with the error. And then let's just module.exports, because I always forget to export if I don't do it right away, the auth user owns post middleware. Now in here, we're going to do a few things. We're going to assume that the require authenticated user middleware is run before this one. So we're going to assume that the user exists. We'll say const user equals res.locals. And then we'll say const post ID equals rec.param. So we'll assume that it's making a request to a route where there is a post ID in the endpoint, request parameter in the endpoint. Then we will actually go get that post. So we'll say post.fetch post by ID with the post ID. Then all we need to do is say, hey, if the email of the user who created that post does not equal the user authenticated user's email, we're going to throw a new forbidden error. I like this one because just forbidden error sounds so ominous. User is not allowed to update other users' posts. Dot. And then let's just take that post and let's attach it to res.locals in case we want to use it later. We might not, but it saves us a round trip to the database. Then we'll just call next if all is well. So that's cool. I mean, it's like this is a very useful function. It'll ensure that anytime we want to protect a certain resource, we'll just put this middleware in between the request handler and the security.require authenticated user middleware. Let's actually use it. Let's go ahead and do it. So in that post request here, in that put request here, we already have the security.require authenticated user. Let's also import the permissions middleware. So we'll take this permissions middleware and we will use it right after our require authenticated user middleware. And we'll say permissions.auth user owns post. And this will ensure, this middleware link will ensure that first, that a user is authenticated, and second, that that user is the owner of the post found at post ID. And if that's the case, everything here will be good. So we'll just say const post ID equals rec.params. Then we'll say const post equals await post.edit post. And we'll take post update will be whatever the rec.body is, I guess. And post ID will come from the route. Now, if all goes well, we'll return res.status 200.json, and we'll pass in the post. Ta-da! Now we need to implement this edit post function. Notice, by the way, we have 2 middlewares at this particular endpoint here, and we could have 40. It doesn't really matter. But this is really the power of Express middleware. This route handler is not even 10 lines long, really, because most of the logic that handles security permissions is offloaded to our middleware. And this is the power that comes with the Express middleware application architecture, is that this keeps our routes thin, and it makes our app a lot easier to reason about. We know exactly what's happening here. It's not super complicated. And these are named well enough that we kind of understand the pipeline of how logic is passing through, or how the request and response objects are being transformed. So that leaves us responsible for just writing the SQL. Let's do it. Where did I put that? It's down here at the bottom. Is this the last one? Ooh, it's exciting. Okay, let's wrap this up. So let's just copy this required field section here. I think we only have, you know what? I think let's just only allow them to update the caption for the time being. I'm going to keep it an array in case we want to change that later, but we'll say that the only thing that they can update is the caption, and they must include it. Otherwise, it's a no-go. Then we're going to write a query. We'll say const results equals await db.query. And in it, we will update the posts table, and we will set the caption equal to whatever is passed in, and we will set the updated at value equal to a new timestamp, just so that we know exactly when it was updated. We will only update the post table where the ID is equal to the post ID, and then we will let's actually just copy this right here. Return the post itself for the time being. And then we'll pass in the post update.caption and the post ID. Now, having handled that, we just return results.rows 0. And that should work. Now, again, at the moment, we're only letting the users update the caption attribute, but that's totally fine. And actually, given that we're only updating it's a partial update, this feels more like a patch request rather than a put request. And the difference is that a patch request is generally used to do partial updates, while a put request is generally used for like full updates. So let's actually go in and modify that route. Instead of making it a put route, let's make it a patch route. It just feels more correct, I would say. So now let's try it out, at least. We have 2 posts. This one here, the suite setup. And I think we are currently logged in with that user. So let's send a patch request to this same endpoint, but let's update this caption to say very suite setup. But you know what? Let's log in with the original user, the first user, just so we can see our permissions module is working correctly. We want to know that this middleware is blocking people who don't own the post from making that request. And of course, we got to set our server. We want it to start. Otherwise, it won't know how to do anything, how to handle any requests. Cool. We have our forbidden 403 error. It's giving us that no response, not allowed. Users not allowed to update other users' posts. But the real question is, what happens when we try to update our own post? Does it work? Let's find out. Post is not defined. Cool. Got an error. It's going to happen. Now, let's see where that post is not defined. I'm guessing I did it here. So let's see. Yes. Here. That's because I copy-pasted it. Every time I copy-paste, I have a typo. So instead, this is supposed to be post update. Has on property. Let's try that again. And let's send that request one more time. Oh, amazing. Look at that. And the caption is now updated from suite setup to very suite setup. Let's say very Very, very sweet setup. Oh, amazing. Works like a charm. Magnificent. So we only have one route left. Time to commit our work to Git. We'll do git status, git add, git commit, added permissions middleware, and implemented patch route. Great. We're ready for the last part.